All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining me today for this week's installment of Wednesday Wisdom. Today, I'm Alex Herring. I'm the Assistant Director of Campus Facilities and Sustainability Initiatives. And today we're joined with Melinda Peters of Casey Trees. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the trees in the city and then a little bit about some of the trees on campus. So for now, I'm going to turn it over to our guest, Melinda, and then at the end of her presentation, there'll be time for questions and then some brief announcements. So I hope you all enjoy today's talk, and thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here with you all today. So let me just get my screen set up. Okay, so for some of you, you might not know who we are, Casey Trees. We're a nonprofit in the district, and today I wanted to give you a little bit of background on our urban forest, what that means, and what we've done on your campus, and what we hope to do in the future with you all. So our mission is to restore, enhance, and protect the tree canopy of the nation's capital. And we do this through many types of community engagement opportunities that includes tree planting, inventorying trees, advocating for trees, caring for trees, and learning how to protect them through youth programs and other ID and pruning classes. So many topics, but of course, all revolving around our trees. So how did Casey Trees come to be in the district? Well, in 1999, the Post printed a story that documented the state of DC's urban forest. And this was interesting, and I'd love to go into a little bit more of the history of trees in DC, but that's another time. So maybe we can talk about that at a later date. But the history of trees in DC is pretty fascinating. We're actually known as the City of Trees. And this was even from the beginning of the city planning, when Pierre Lafont was hired to plan the city avenues, and he lined them with elm trees. And so there's always been a real interest and desire to make sure we have trees in the urban development. And so DC was actually struggling. The budget was in pretty despair in the 90s, and no trees were planted in 1995. And so this article really kind of highlighted the decline of this canopy. And that caught the eye of Betty Brown Casey. And she, hold on, let's see what happened here. Caught the eye of Betty Brown Casey. But before I go there, what is this tree canopy that this article was describing? And you see this map, this is a bird's eye view. So tree canopy refers to the coverage of a tree over a space. So the percentage of coverage that these trees provide. So if you look kind of closely, the larger circles are more are older trees. They're more established than some of the younger street trees. So you can see how they're just lining the streets around homes and buildings, and there's a baseball field there. And so this was of interest, like I said, of this local resident, Miss Betty Brown Casey, and she read this article and was really troubled. Her husband was a lover of trees, and she decided to take action. So she actually left some funding to the Garden Club of America and asked them to start kind of a pilot and see if there was something that could be done to increase and help support the tree canopy of the district. And so in 1999, the Washington Post published that article. Mrs. Casey gave some money to the Garden Club of America, and Casey Trees was established as a 501c3 nonprofit. So in 2001, we were started, and you might think, oh, we must have just gone, right away, gotten started, planted trees in the city. Well, that's not exactly how it started. So before we get to the rest of the timeline here, you have to ask, when you're posed with this question of the canopy is declining and how do you restore it, what do you do first? So this would be nice to have a little poll here to see what you guys think. Should we plant trees? Should we advocate for the protection of the ones that are already here, or inventory to see what's left? And the answer is we first needed to inventory, because one of our favorite sayings is, you can't manage what you don't know. And this is very true and across the board. So really gaining some knowledge about what was here already in the city so that we could make a plan on how to protect what was already existing, and then how to make a plan on what needed to be planted in the future was really important. So how did we do this? Well, in those first early months in the 2002 timeframe, 300 volunteers, students, they deployed 106,000 trees and 32,000 empty tree boxes. So when I say that, you have to think about if you've walked around the city and seen the tree boxes that are in between the sidewalk and the road, that's what I'm referring to there. And so this inventory provided a baseline for our tree strategy, as I mentioned. So now we've been able to, in partnership with DC's Urban Forestry Division, the National Park Service, and many other stakeholders like all the universities in the city, to form this baseline of tree strategy. And we continue these inventories today because it's really important to maintain and understand what is on our, what's in our forest. So again, we couldn't do this without the help of community partners, volunteers, youth at schools. We work with a lot of elementary schools. We work with all the universities. And all of this is helping the district to reach its goal that's part of the DC Sustainability Plan. So here's where you all, things that you're learning in your courses can really help you maybe grasp and understand the intricate layers of, why these things end up being important and how all of these partners are involved and play a role. So the city has a goal of reaching 40% tree canopy by the year of 2032. And where are we now? So we're actually at 38% tree canopy, which you might think seems pretty good. That 2% doesn't seem like very much, but it is. That 2% is still plantable green space that's about the size of the whole National Mall. So we have a little ways to go, but we're on a good trajectory to meet that goal by 2032 because of all of the partnerships that we have with the DC government and National Park Service, and the rec centers and universities and residents. Again, all of these people play a role. So let's just take a step back. What is this sustainability plan that DC put into action? This happened in 2011 when Mayor Vincent Gray signed this plan. And at the time we were at 36% tree canopy with that goal to reach 40% by 2032. So this plan is fantastic. It outlines, and I'm going to show it to you later. I'll pull up some online resources to share with you all later. So this plan goes through many different aspects of how the city wants to, as urban development continues, how they want to incorporate and establish good goals to reach for the future. So again, here's the page on 40% tree canopy. And then I just wanted to highlight, this is the picture of the website here with Sustainable DC 2.0 plan. And you can see the table of contents. There's many things that it reviews and discusses, but trees intersect with not only nature, but this built environment, the climate, energy, health, nature, water. So again, the importance of what our urban forest does for our city is well noted here. So just to wrap up, our staff is comprised of a science and policy team that's devoted to working with our urban planners and advocacy and helping us work with the folks making policy and creating these plans. Tree planting, that's pretty self-explanatory. They get our trees in the ground. So our urban foresters help design and work with partners to develop the right space and get the right tree in the right place. Of course, we couldn't do this without our administrative team. And then our education department, so that's what I'm in charge of. And that normally includes our youth programs and adult programs as well. Our communications and development team, and then our farm, which was established in 2011. So Mrs. Casey, back to that timeline, she gave a piece of land out in Virginia in 2008, and our farm was developed to help us be better equipped to getting trees transplanted into the city with a stock that we were able to sort of manage a little bit better. So again, why trees? Well, our urban forest. Let's kind of look through and think about those aspects of the sustainability plan that were outlined in that table of contents, and how do trees really play a role in that? So trees help with carbon storage. They remove carbon dioxide that causes climate change. They help with stormwater runoff. They reduce the runoff, making our rivers less polluted. As you know, DC is surrounded on two sides by the Potomac and the Anacostia, and there's been great strides and huge efforts to really clean up those rivers. And it goes beyond just the rivers because they're in the Chesapeake Bay watershed, which of course is another reason to make sure our rivers are clean as they flow into the bay. And then, helping to make sure those habitats are sustained for long term. Air quality. So trees remove harmful pollution and improve our public health. So just quick, I've got a couple cool slides that I want to share. So carbon storage, we've been able to calculate using this really interesting program called iTree Design. And it can help us calculate and come up with numbers that provide some interesting data on what our trees are doing. And I'm going to share this online resource with you in just a little while too. But last year we calculate our forest every couple years. And last year we found that by putting in the species of trees, we put in measurements about how big they are, we can come up with, an estimate of how many tons of carbon are being removed. So it's quite a bit of carbon being removed every year to help with climate change. What about absorbing stormwater? We can also calculate that DC's trees filter so many cubic feet of water. That's equal to about 500 Olympic swimming pools a year, right? We can, this helps us understand impervious surface. So in DC, this is a map of DC here, and the pink highlights the moderate level of impervious surface, meaning cement. This is what an urban city looks like when you have a lot of cement and areas where water can't penetrate and get into the soil, then that's a real issue for stormwater. And if that can running into the rivers and causing flooding. Don't know if any of you were here, and some of you were around on September 10th when we had the big storm and parts of Brookland and Eckington and Bloomingdale flooded. So again, trees can help with that runoff. This just highlights a couple species of trees that are really good in the district. how they can help with runoff. So the tulip tree is in green there. The American elm is the pink. Common crepe myrtle is the yellow, and the American beech there is the blue. So just an example of how different species can help provide these services. Some are better at it than others, but then some provide more carbon storage, or maybe they help clean the air better. So altogether, it's why you need a diverse forest rather than planting all elms like LaFont had planned in his earlier plan of the city. We like to have a diverse group of species that help provide these services to us. So clean air, trees also help with this. Removal of air pollutants. This is a good, just a snapshot of one day showing the air quality index of the city. And if you think back to the little map that just showed the impervious surface, you can see that that was mostly in the center there. And we see that the air quality isn't as good, and that where the air quality is really good, the bright green, that strip that goes down kind of the middle there, anybody know what that is? That's Rock Creek Park. So that's a very green area, not much, not many urban developments. I mean, there's no housing, so there's lots of canopy space and providing a good area for clean air. So again, every year the trees remove 870,000 pounds of pollutants, which is the size of about 3 blue whales, how much they weigh. So here's just a quick snapshot of this tree design.
I don't know, because like everyone else is in class.
Oh, pardon? Somebody have a question? You good?
Sorry, that was an accident.
Oh, that's okay. No worries. So the iTree design is a really great modeling software that was established by a couple different organizations, and it's able to report on, by inputting some data, you can really get some things. So this could be really useful depending on classes down the road. You might be able to use this tool. It's open source, you can use it, and I'll share the website with you in just a little while. So what else did we look at through that table of contents that are really important? Trees, of course, help us with just providing healthier communities. Tree-lined streets are known to calm traffic, which is really important in DC. They're good for business and tourism, help with our parks, they provide shade. And they also are now known, trees and forest green spaces are known to help with mental and physical wellness. The U.S. National Institutes of Health has clinically shown that being among nature improves your immune system, can increase your blood pressure, improves your respiratory functioning. I mean, you saw the difference that was clear. The data showed that Rock Creek had better air quality than the downtown district. And it also just elicits, this is what the report said, elicits the human feeling of awe. So who doesn't want to get out in nature, especially during this crazy time of year and during this pandemic? It's been very important to have green spaces. And then, of course, lastly, they support wildlife. It's known that some species of oak can help support a couple hundred different types of insects and birds and bats and all the pollinators that come through. Squirrels, provides a lot of food. All right, so wrapping up again, how do we continue to help with this? I just wanted to show a few pictures of the farm. It's a huge piece of property. It's 730 acres out in Virginia, and that's almost half the size of Rock Creek. So it's quite a space. We are, as I said, it just started in 2011. So there's still a lot of space that can be developed and, increase our tree farm and usage and really be able to get trees on a good track to come into the city and hopefully expand. So when we were first established, we were just a DC based organization. But I mean, as anybody knows, the longer you're in DC, you become part of this metro community. And of course, we'd like to do some planting outside the district as well. So any way to keep increasing our canopy. And it's right along the Shenandoah. So here's a map of where the farm is out there on the far left and where DC, in comparison to DC. So it's out there right on the river. And you can see in our spring 2019 season, this is a map of just showing where we planted trees that were from our farm. So we're almost getting all of our trees from the farm now rather than other nurseries and other sources. So that's been a really exciting benefit to increasing the production at the farm. So for those new to the area too, if you're, if you end up staying in DC after you finish up or buy a home or live in a, work with a company that has potential green space, we work with all types of partners. We hope to get back out on your campus and plant in the spring. And we'll talk about some of the other plantings that we've done in the past, but we have a residential program. We work with schools, universities, and public and private schools in the district. We work with a lot of other community groups, and then all of our government partners, so all of the parks and rec centers. And we're starting to do a little bit actually with some of the national park land. DC has a lot of that, so we do some plantings. We've done a few on the mall now. We've done a few in Rock Creek, and it's exciting to be partnering with them. So tree planting programs, that's one of the things. And then I mentioned, we have to keep track of what's here. We not only inventory, but we're also collecting data so that we can then use it in that iTree design to come up with, how well are these trees really helping our forest. And this is an example of some of the elms that were studied, 2015 totals. As a whole, we had 94% survive, only 5% mortality rate. I'm sorry, that was for total trees. And then we can divide that out into particular species. So the American elm, the elms that we planted had 96% survival and only 3% mortality. So these are doing well in our city. The other thing that we focus on is part of we've been helpful in protecting the trees that are already there. So remember, part of our mission is we preserve, we protect, and enhance. We've been able in 2002, the Urban Forest Preservation Act was the only urban forestry law in the district. And this created a distinction between special trees, and then it was amended in 2016 to create this law surrounding heritage trees. So for those of you who haven't been in the district that long, there's a huge amount, an increase in urban development. And if you have time to, get around or just, look on a Google map and look at the space and how it's changed over the years. So much urban development is happening. And in order to protect some of that green space or make sure that developers don't remove these large canopy trees that are providing so many benefits that we can calculate and know, this law helps protect them. So the heritage tree are trees that are larger than 100 inches in diameter. And then special trees are ones that are kind of this mid-range. So this has been really important to helping to protect the trees that are already in our canopy so that a developer can't just come in and wipe things out. Or if they do, they have to pay a fee. Or if they do, then they have to make sure their plan includes planting more trees to make up for this loss. Oh, sorry, this is animated. One other thing that we have been starting to focus on in the last few years is to help preserve some of the land. So there's a couple properties around the district that are now considered conservation easements. And these are quite interesting. It's where a land trust or entity that only owns the development rights. So this is basically protecting the above ground space so that it can't be developed, and it will forever, what do we call it? It will forever green this area. So we currently have 5 easements around the district, and you can see those. I can show those to you later on some of the online sources. We have those mapped out in the district. There's also tax benefits to the landowner, so it's really like a win-win. And I mentioned, urban development, and part of our science and policy, they work to understand and help sit in on a lot of these planning talks as more spaces are being developed, and understanding the difference between these matter of rights and planned unit developments. And again, I won't go into too much detail here, but I just wanted you to know kind of the breadth of what we do. And every year since 2008, we've been releasing a tree report card. And this includes, we kind of grade the efforts of the cities as a whole. So again, we work with, all of those partners I mentioned earlier, and we categorize this into 4 groups. We look at tree coverage, tree health, tree planting, and tree protection. And we just put out our 2019 recently, and we're still doing well with our plans and goals moving forward, and still set to reach that goal. And but we can't do it without people like you. So I want to take a minute and show you some online resources and talk about the trees on your campus. So let me just switch screens here, and we can have a little open chat too, to talk about some things. So let me share this with you. So as you could see in some of those slides, we use GIS mapping software to help us keep track of all of our trees. And of course, we've got it now in sort of a database. So before I get to this map here, which is your campus, I just wanted to quick show you on our homepage, under resources, we have really cool maps. And these, they show different things that you might be interested in. So for example, here's the conservation easement story map showing the 5 sites, telling you a little bit about each of those. And then the DC tree inventory map. This highlights all of the trees that we've inventoried, and can be really, really cool to look around when you're in a space and you want to know what trees are in that area. We have some other, what we call story maps. These provide the GIS kind of mapping data, but then it also has a few interactive stories that go along with that space. So we've done a few of those, one at Lincoln Park, one at Fort Reno Park. These are 2 with some historical significance in the city. This might be of interest to some of you in the spring. We've got the DC blossoming tree map. We've got our watering map, or how about the fall colors map? So if some of you are local, you might want to check this out and have a nice walk around town with your mask on, of course, and check out some of the fall colors. So there's lots of good resources there. And then before we get to the map, I just wanted to highlight, here's the Sustainable DC plan, which again, depending on some of your studies and what you're interested in, this could be some really, you might find some really valuable information in this type of document, especially for understanding some of the other programs and goals that the city has for long-term sustainability. All right, so let's I'll show you. Well, first, let's look at the map of your university. So I think, part of this, I'm gonna the next 10 minutes here, just wanted to talk a little bit about our trees. So we've done some plantings with Catholic over the years. I looked it up. The first one we've done was fall 2011 was listed on the list, and we've come back over the years to plant more. And again, we work with folks at the university, and then our urban foresters help develop and design the plan for that space. So on this map here, the green dots represent the plantings that we've done over the years. The yellow dots are the street trees that were planted. So Casey Trees focuses on working with, our plantings are on private land, so large, the universities, schools, residential, and then our public parks, we work with the government to get them into those spaces. We don't plant street trees. Street trees are left up to DC's urban forestry department, which we work closely with so that we're all getting a diverse group of species in the ground. Now, how do we come up with those diverse trees? Well, let's just take a look at our trees. So Urban Hardy Trees of DC, we've got a really nice list on our website, and I like that we can filter. So if you're looking or trying to understand things that urban foresters have to consider, of course, are different light conditions, like the shade, partial shade, full sun, and then the size of tree. So again, what's going on in that space and around there. So on your campus, if you're in a part of the open kind of grassy areas, you might be able to get a larger canopy tree there. If you're over closer to another, the side of a building or something, you don't want it to tower too high, or windows, or depending on soil, you'll be looking at more small, medium trees. So these things are all part of the consideration for our plantings. Then of course, a lot of times when we're working with residents and homeowners, they're like, oh, we want lovely fall color, or we want spring flowers. And so you can kind of look through this list and see what some of the features that they might provide. Again, what helps when we think about that iTree program I mentioned is, what are some of the other benefits? Are you is the area that you're looking to plant on campus very wet? Do you need a tree that can really take in a lot of that water? And some are better at that than others. So this kind of goes to the point of also, thinking, if you're interested in thinking about green jobs, I mean, this is such a range of opportunities for folks, to tree planting and planning, all the way to what policy and advocate actions are like for long-term success of our forest. So let's just take a quick look to highlight a couple trees. Let's see, Alex, where are you right now? Is there a tree out your window that we can look up on the map?
So let me see. I'm at the power plant. So if you look on John McCormick Road, There's like, if you're
Okay. John McCormick.
right there, yeah. So that's the law school, and if you go another building over the other way, right there is that's where I am
All
located.
right. Well, here's a street tree. You've got a willow oak right outside of that building that we have documented. And then we've done quite a few plantings here. So there's a ginkgo, more ginkgos. Oh, some sugar maple. Let's see, a couple sugar maples. So again, kind of going through this list, you can also pull up the list and look through. So I know when Alex and I talked earlier, we had discussed how we feel or how we decide, what's the difference between native species versus not, or do we worry about in planting something that was introduced? Well, urban forestry is a little different than maybe some of the larger like forestry departments that are dealing with restoring a larger space. When you're in an urban environment, you have to think about a lot of other things too. What can deal with salt? What can deal with the levels of pollutants? What can grow well in a very small area with not great soil? So no, a lot of species have been cultivated or developed into some sort of hybrid or something that can sort of withstand and have this genetic rigor, and it's okay. There are definitely some species that have been introduced that we now know are kind of invasive, and we over the years, I'm not meaning, when I say we, I'm talking kind of collectively as like urban foresters and as people start to learn things. One of my favorite stories about an invasive species was that the USDA introduced kudzu because they were going to use it as a erosion control. Well, it worked, but then and we now know, oh no, that it just has destroyed so many green spaces and has taken over. If you're familiar with what that is, it's a vine that can just blanket roadsides and sort of herbaceous level, that lower level growth in the South. So that's something, look up that later, the kudzu. It's like the little shapahora that can just take over. That's a good Halloween costume, very scary. But we know that there are some trees that we've kind of taken off our list even since the early 2000s that we don't want to plant anymore. So, and then we try to keep in, a lot of these are native. A lot of trees that were introduced are not, they're very well known. They've been established for a long time in North America, and they're fine for urban places. So our list is not that big. I mean, if you go back to the tree species, I mean, you're only really looking at 50 species or so that we end up kind of planting. And it is a mix between, here's a pine that we have. We've got a mix of what we call, conifer trees. So think of your pines and firs and cedars and spruces. You guys have a great spruce tree right outside. Where is it? It's right. No, that's the willow oak. I don't know where I am. I think it's right here. No. Okay, well, I don't know where it is, but you have a really great one. Oh, it's not one of these because we didn't plant it. It's one that's already established. I think it's right outside, like right in this area. You guys have some great conifer trees around campus. So again, this map is only showing the green dots where what we've planted. So I was walking around campus a couple of weeks ago, And the well-established trees are not documented on this map yet because we haven't inventoried those. So that could be something to consider if we could all get out together sometime when we can do that again and get the rest of your trees inventoried so that we have a better representation of what's on your campus. I know there's like a really cool like larch right here. There's just some really well-established old trees on campus. So well done, keeping those protected. And so I guess I wanted to open this up about questions on particular species. And if you all had questions on the way we plant or anything like that, is that good timing?
Yes, that's perfect timing. And I guess just to kick off the questions, you mentioned the fall colors map, but are there trees that, at this time of year that we should be on the watch for, or, the big red trees or the orange and yellows?
Yeah. So yes, and so why the trees turn colors? It's only mostly our deciduous trees. So the big kind of broadleaf trees that have big leaves. I'll get to the needle leaves in just a second because there actually are a few in this area that lose their leaves in the winter. So deciduous are usually the ones that drop their leaves before winter to get ready for overwintering and keep their energy for spring. And so that's what's happening when the leaves start to change. The temperature's changing. They're noting this. They want to keep their sugars, so they start sort of holding sugars and water in, and some of the chemicals, especially in oaks and maples, cause them to turn those pretty orange, red, and yellow colors. So you will see that quite a bit. I mean, those are very distinct and kind of well-known ones. And you do have quite a few maples on campus that you'll see. Now the ginkgos, that's a really fun old kind of ancient tree in its own group, and they also lose their leaves over winter to kind of, again, overwinter and protect itself so that it's ready for spring and to keep all that energy ready so that it can put out flowers and fruits. And they turn sort of a yellow color, and they're quite interesting. Ginkgos have this kind of signaling. Well, this is getting into plant physiology and some cool stuff, but they drop all their leaves at the same time. Or, that's kind of the typical. Of course, there might be one or two leaves left on the tree, but in general, they drop them all at the same time. It's not sort of a gradual thing that happens with some of the maples and oaks. So it's kind of a cool phenomenon when you see this. We have a lot of ginkgos around the city. That's a very popular street tree, and they lose their leaves all at the same time. So they can be quite beautiful. They're the fan-like leaf that you'll see around town. And we do tree ID. That's another thing. Tree ID is a whole animal in itself. It's fun to learn all of the different terms and get to know your trees better. But this is a great way to do it. You can just, watch your tree outside wherever you are right now. Watch it through the seasons, and then you'll gain a better understanding of what's going on in that space and what it's providing. So the other I wanted to mention is on this list here. Let me pull up this again. You'll see you all do have a few Don redwoods. This tree was rediscovered in China in somewhere in the 1940s or 50s by some researchers. It's a relative to the giant redwoods that you might know from out west. And it was kind of reestablished, brought back, and seeds were sent to many gardens and arboretum around the country. And so you'll see it, and it's a very common kind of garden tree now. And the Arboretum here, the U.S. National Arboretum, has a really, really beautiful sort of grove of them that they planted in the 50s. And, you know, they're not that tall yet. I mean, they're big trees, but they're nothing like the giant ones out west. But they're interesting. I mean, this is a cone-bearing tree, but these lose their needles. So they actually do turn a really pretty yellowy orange in the fall and then drop their needles. And same with bald cypress. So we do have some bald cypress trees around different parks and along the river because they're very good around water. Well known in sort of southern US, Florida, but we do have some around the area. Kenilworth Aquatic Garden has some really cool bald cypress, and they're the ones who produce these interesting, what they call knees. So they have these little protrusions that stick up from their root system around the base of the tree. So you have quite a few on campus to look at, or again, wherever you are. If you know, you'll get to campus if you're not here right now, you'll be back someday. And there's quite a few that you can see. Lots of lindens. These are beautiful, kind of heart-shaped leaves, produce nice fruits and flowers in the, you can make a nice tea with the flower in the spring. So there's lots of other benefits too to these. So let's, yeah, I'll let somebody else ask a question if there's any. I could talk forever.
I do have a question. So I'm from New Jersey, and we have this website that basically like gives us suggestions for like what to plant in our yard and stuff like that. And most of the stuff is like flowers and such, but it also tells us like which ones are native, and like which ones would like help the bees, stuff like that. I was wondering if DC had anything like that.
Let me think. Not specific to DC. I mean, there's lots of tree websites out there that would tell you some. I mean, our list, like once you click on something like the Northern Red Oak, can you guys still see this? We provide a few things, but we don't get into native versus not for our species. It's not hard to find, and I don't know of a specific site that does that for trees, but like U.S. National Forest, I mean, you can look up just basically tree species descriptions, I guess. And so you kind of have to know, I don't know of anything that's gonna, it seems like a nice website where it tells you what to put in. I don't know of a tree one that does that. I have to put that down on my list of maybe things to do. But you just have to, you'd have to use some sort of guide, or that's why an urban forester would, you know, they study and know those things. Yeah. It's a good question. What else? So tree ID is one of my favorite things. Here's some nice fall red oak leaves. Oaks are all out right now. One way to tell the difference between an oak, there's two groups. There's the white oak group and the red oak group. There's tons of oaks. I have a book here right now that is just about oaks. I've been looking through. I mean, this is the whole oak book, so it's too many to try to learn, but if you can get the difference between white and red, whites are lobed and reds have very spiky leaves. So now you can at least tell the difference between those.
I do have another question. So I started reading this book a while ago. I never finished, called The Hidden Life of Trees, and it's really good. But I was wondering if you had like any other suggestions for books to read about trees.
Oh, yes. Is somebody else talking? No. Yes. There's so many tree books. And depending on what your sort of interest is, you know, that I've got one here. You know, are you looking for more urban forestry books? And what does that mean? That's just looking at the species that are doing well in major urban cities. This is a great book. Can I stop sharing for a minute so I can see? Yeah, so this book by Jill Jones, Urban Forest, is really interesting. And she really highlights and talks about how different cities, like specific trees, there's something about the ginkgo. We're in here, the redwood story is in here. The elms, the what happened basically in DC with LaFont planting all the elms, and then a fungus came through and destroyed our American elms. And so when you think about long-term planning and how succession occurs, so American chestnut is another great example of a tree that used to be very prominent in our forest on the East Coast, and a disease had struck it, and so now it's been pretty much wiped out. So researchers have tried to come up with ways to hybridize, or find a way to create some genetic resistant species that could grow again. But what ends up taking over that space in the forest? And that's why in a lot of urban planning, we can't always use just natives, because we need something that has a little bit, that's been developed to have a little different vigor, or can, withstand those pollutants and runoff from the city. A really good example actually is the London plane tree. So it looks like a sycamore. Let me see if I can pull up the picture here. It looks like a sycamore, and a sycamore is a native tree. It's very, very well known. That one is one of the trees that, oh, here we go, that you may know or familiar with. So American sycamore, you might see this in Rock Creek. It has very specific bark, very camouflage color. And so this has an interesting story. The American sycamore was crossed with a European variety. It kind of happened in a garden. There's arguments about how or who did it, but a new cultivar was developed, and it is really urban hardy. It can withstand, and it's very, very tough. And so you'll see that all over the city. So the London plane, do we have that one? Yeah. So it looks exactly the same as the sycamore. And so it is kind of hard to tell the difference, but when you see this tree planted along streets, it's kind of one of the offspring of the American sycamore. So this is a good example of kind of how a native helped, breed something that we now use in a lot of urban spaces. The one difference, the fruits are a little different. The London plane has usually one fruit, and the sycamore will have two sort of together, two of these little balls. But that's a good example of something being developed for an urban place that ended up being very hardy. So good books. I mean, there's lots of kind of the urban ones. I have so many tree books. So it depends on what you're interested in. Feel free to send me, I can send my info to you all if you want to, I'm happy to, if you send me something you're interested in looking up, I can send you some examples. If you want to know, more about oaks, then this is, that's a really good book. But we also have a species guide that we are actually in the process of just kind of revamping right now, but it highlights the most common trees in like this area. It is hard to find a guide that showcases everything because it's so different when you're planting in an urban space rather than for forestry and in more native places where, yeah, and think about, going out to the forest or something. I think a lot of reason that we haven't done much with like Rock Creek in the past is because we were really devoted to more of the urban space and parks. And, they're wanting to make sure that natives are being planted there. I don't know if you're all familiar with Kingman and Heritage Islands. If not, you need to check this out. I can pull this up on the map real quick. It's a really cool space. Alex, have you been there? Have you been to Kingman and Heritage?
I haven't been there, but I've driven by it and seen the signs, so just haven't gotten a chance to go there.
Has anybody been there yet? So it's an interesting little space in DC, right here behind RFK Stadium. So along the Anacostia here, and Kenilworth is another place you should definitely visit. Same with the National Arboretum. They both border the Anacostia here. And then in the river, there's actually an island. So this gray section here is actually this island Kingman, and this is this is Heritage Island. And this is a great representation of what DC used to be like, because it's really marshy and wet, and the habitat is really interesting. But we've done some plantings on this space, and yes, they require that we only plant native species. So again, we do mostly oh wait, did I share this? I didn't share it. There we go. So here's Kingman, and here's Heritage, and then Kenilworth on the Arboretum. So you definitely, we planted native here because they're trying to restore part of this landscape to be what it was really before we moved in and started building things. And it also will help protect the river and clean up, be more of a filter before it flows into the Potomac and meets here. So again, there's some fascinating history of DC and what we've done to the river. The Anacostia used to be the major thoroughfare before it started to be developed. Bladensburg Port was a huge boat. That was one of the kind of port cities in John Smith time. So it looked very different back then. So it's definitely worth a check whenever you can get out to Kenilworth and the gardens over here, because it's a really neat space, very different than like Rock Creek. And you'll see examples of native species there. But again, of course, let's see, question here. What are some native trees to DC region, and how has the tree canopy changed over time? Yeah, so we're kind of discussing that. LaFont had planted only elms. So we now know that's a bad idea for planting. You don't want to just put in one species. That's why it's better to have a diverse mix. so that if something were to come in and wipe something out, then it could be replaced, or you'd still have a forest that could sustain itself. Okay. And some of the native ones, I mean, all the oaks, maples, most of them are native. The sycamore, I mean, the London plane is a cultivar, but it's still a tree that we consider. So I hope that's sort of helpful. And I know you guys, oh yeah, you guys have to have your little, Alex, you've got a couple slides.
Sure, yeah, I think just in the interest of time, I'll just go quickly. But Melinda, I really appreciate the talk you gave about the history of the trees in the city, and just kind of like ones that are native and adaptive, and all the great work that Casey Trees does. I'll probably send out a follow-up email just connecting you, and if any of you all have other questions for Melinda, please feel free to email me, Harry, HARRY, @CUA. And if you have any questions for Melinda, I can pass them along. I'm really hoping that in the future, in the very near future, we can do a project, whether it's planting a tree, or doing inventory, or there's a lot of ideas, and I really want to keep the partnership going with Casey Trees. So I really thank you for your time today.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope wish everybody well. I know this is a strange semester, and it is for us too. I mean, we want to be with everyone out in some green space. So looking forward to spring. Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
And then tomorrow, just if you all are looking to dig your teeth into what's in the campus sustainability plan, you heard a little bit about the citywide sustainability plan. Tomorrow there is an SGA Sustainability Town Hall that I'll be part of, and that's at 6 Eastern Time. So Holly will be there. She is the SGA Environmental Initiative Director. And then I hope to see you all tomorrow. We can talk more about how the trees fit into the sustainability plan for the campus. So that's all the big announcements that I had. And thank you all for coming to the afternoon Wednesday Wisdom.
Thank you all. Hope that was helpful.
Thank you.
Okay.